want to have, I'll just say dozens, of park districts in the system. And there are advantages and disadvantages. One advantage I see is the neighbors in that neighborhood are paying, and they tend to pay closer attention. But there's some huge swings in how much a property owner pays for these districts based on where they happen to buy a house and if there's one of these parks in it. So there's some substantial philosophical questions. I haven't heard in the budget conversation, we didn't talk about something like, you know what, we think you're doing too good of a job taking care of these parks. Can't we ratchet back the mowing or the watering or things like that? We can have those discussions, but I don't get the sense we're over maintaining these. I've not taken those complaints over the past 4 years that these are meticulous and we're spending too much money or too much time beautifying these neighborhood parks.
Okay. Councilmember Boyette and Rupsis.
Thank you, Mayor. Wyatt, there's a couple of properties that I call every year to code enforcement, and the people this year were very frustrated that I talked with. They couldn't get anybody to go cut the grass, the weeds. Is that because no one wants to work anymore? Is that our general philosophy, or was there too many weeds that the people couldn't cut, or any idea? And I felt sorry for even calling them because they did seem kind of frustrated.
Councilmember Boyette and Mayor and Council, we'd certainly, if we knew specifically the properties, we could look into that. What the procedure is, and I guess to answer your question, no, Parks is our mowing crew, and we have to send mowers to do properties that the property owners won't cut. And they've been mowing all summer for us. In fact, more mowing than last year. So if we're dealing with a property and they're not going to cut it and we send it to cut, then it does get cut by Parks ultimately. We do have situations where people are trying to get them done and we work with them, but eventually if it doesn't happen, then it ends up getting cut. So I guess we'd want to check into the ones that you're talking about.
Well, the one code enforcement said, well, the Parks Department was having supervisors out cutting the grass because they couldn't find anybody to run the mowers. I mean, I'd
love to let Mr. Whitaker respond to that, but I know they've been helping us cut this year. Yeah.
Councilmember Boyette, that's not correct. We were fully staffed this past season, and generally our supervisors do not get on mowers and cut the grass.
Could I add, though, it is my understanding that there were more individuals who didn't get their weeds taken care of, and my assumption is because, as you mentioned, they were having a hard time finding someone who would take care of that for them. So we ended up about twice as many that we needed to take care of than if you just were to look a year ago at 20-some properties. I think you're looking at 40-some this year. And I would speculate it's an indication of what you indicated, which are more people this year had a problem finding someone who would come cut their weeds for them. And thus we ended up doing it and needing to run it through the system.
Okay, Councilmember Rupsis.
Chris, I'm going to apologize in advance for this. We could technically amend 7F to increase by 1.27 million and assess 0 on the PMDs. And I know there's this big philosophical question on whether or not we want to have 36 PMDs or not, but technically couldn't we achieve the same result by increasing the PD1 assessment by 1.27 million and not and assessing 0 on those PMDs?
I believe yes, you need to go through the proper noticing, but the authority to adjust the assessment does lie with the elected body. So that's what you're asking, right? Could we roll, in essence, all 36 PMDs into Park District 1 and not have these individual PMDs, but have Park District 1 take care of all what it is plus these 36 tonight? I don't know.
Would it have to be noticed, or it's just an amendment, or we can't?
I think, I mean, generally speaking, the adjustment would be so significant, although the bottom line, yeah, the adjustment across the board would be big enough that I would be pretty nervous that legal's response would be, you could totally have the authority to do that. Have you noticed it that way? But to not notice it that way and then change that size of a policy shift, I would think would be problematic. Going through the budget process, adopting a budget, and all those public hearings and all those discussions, I think you clearly have the authority to do it.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may,
Andy.
I think you would be limited this year to do it tonight because your assessments followed the budget. Right, so you've adopted a budget assuming that you would assess these. If you were going to do that, you would want to adopt a budget that was consistent with that. Yeah.
Called bait and switch.
But the amount of revenue generated, to your point, is the same, but who pays is going to be quite different.
Sure. Anything else before we open for public hearing? Councilmember Tricky, Councilmember Neese.
I'm just wondering how many of our parks are being watered by the Heights Water District. Do we have any idea?
Councilmember Chiriki, I would have to get back with you in regards to that, but generally speaking, all of our parks in the heights that are not on the ditch are being watered by the Heights Water District.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you. And Mike, if you wouldn't mind, when you get back to that, it'd be great to know, have Jennifer run the numbers on what it would actually cost per gallon or the cost of the water for running through the city versus what we're paying the Heights. I think we'd find it would be significantly less if it was city water. But just so I thought I'd let you know, since you're going to be looking that up, not that you have to do that, I'm just making that comment. My comment is, I think, to Councilmember Repsis about your thought about this moving. I think that's something we should address through council committees. That's a philosophy change, a policy change, and I think that would be a good idea to maybe, once we get these council committees going, to really wrestle with that in a committee form. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Drew, did you have your hand up? No? Okay, anything else before we go to a public hearing? Don't see any, so we'll open it up for public hearing on all 10 of the item 7 SID and assessments, A through J or whatever it is. If you'd like to comment on any item under item 7, please come forward or let us know if you're online. Is there any public comment on any item, any of the sub-items under item 7? Any public comment? Nobody is coming forward in person. Is there anyone online? Kevin indicates no. So we're going to close the public hearing. Before I entertain a motion, I'm just going to ask for or point out something to council and to staff, and ask that you direct your attention, just as an example, to item 7F, kind of in the middle of this part of your packet, dealing with Park District 1 assessment. And I'll also suggest that Karen give her attention to paragraph 3 in the resolution. So item 7F, again, this is just an example. Item 3 in the resolution, notice of hearing. You'll see that it says, and I'm quoting now, on Monday, September 12th, that's today at 5:30 p.m. or soon thereafter, as the matter may be considered on the agenda in the council chambers of the City Hall, Billings, Montana, the City Council will hear objections to the adoption of this resolution. City Clerk is hereby directed to publish notice of this hearing twice, at least 5 days prior to the hearing. So what we're doing here is we're directing the clerk to do something 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago. I'm not quite sure how to do that. My time machine is not working very well. So this is something I pointed out before, and it's been rectified in 7 out of the 10, but not 3 out of the 10. So in the other 7, it properly says that we had this hearing today, and the clerk previously published notice. which makes sense. So my request is if there is a motion for approval on these that, and as we go through, I'll identify the three. We'll have to have separate votes on them. So I'll mention when we get to those, they're actually items 7F, H, and J that still have the old language about future hearings and a future notice. But everything else is fine. But those three, I would recommend we just direct staff to adopt the language that's in the other ones to correct those problems on those three. So, but that's not until we get to item 7F. Let's proceed just one after another. We'll start with item 7A. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve resolution assessing SID 2919 as recommended by staff.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Bernice. Okay, this is the 2919. Is there discussion? If not, we'll proceed to a vote. If in favor of the motion, which is for approval, consistent with staff recommendation, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item 7B, SID 2920. Is there a motion? Councilmember Gulick.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution assessing SID 2920 as recommended by staff.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Bernice. Discussion. Seeing none. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. 7C, SID 2921. Motion, Councilmember Joy.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve a resolution assessing SID 2921 as recommended by staff.
Second.
Second, I heard Councilmember Tidswell. Discussion. Seeing none. If in favor of the motion, approval, item 7C, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. 7D, SID 2922. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution assessing SID 2922 as recommended by staff.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Bernice. Discussion. No discussion. If in favor of the motion for approval consistent with staff recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion, if opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item 7E, SID 2921, Councilmember Tidswell.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution assessing SID 2923 as recommended by staff.
Second. Second, Councilmember Purington. Any discussion? If not, if in favor of the motion approval of item 7E, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. 7F, I'm going to make this motion. This is the first one that goes back to what I was referring to before. I'll move that item 7F be approved, saying, having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve a resolution assessing Park District 1 as recommended by staff with the condition that item 3, dealing with the notice of hearing, be amended by staff to be consistent with the other approved resolutions referencing the past notice of the hearing and the fact that we had a hearing had a hearing tonight. Is there a second? Councilmember Chiriky. Discussion. Seeing none, if in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Voting in opposition to item 7F. This was Park District 1, where council members Neese, Tidswell, and Purington. Motion passes then 8-3. Oh, I'm sorry, 7-3. Thank you for correcting that. Next item, item 7G. Is there a motion? Councilmember Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve the resolution assessing general obligation debt mill levy rates as recommended by staff.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Treaky. Discussion. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. In the past, I've separated this out, the mill levy for the library out. I will not do that this time, but I will be voting against this motion mainly due to the mill levies being assessed, and I believe in excess for the library. And so my support is still for the other two items, but not for the library mill levies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. If in favor of the motion, which is for approval, consistent with staff recommendation, item 7G, general obligation debt mill levy rates, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Voting in opposition, council members Neese and Tidswell. All other voting in favor, so motion passes 8-0. Item 7H. This is also one where the resolution paragraph dealing with the notice of hearing item, paragraph 6, is written in the future tense that we will hear objections and that the clerk is directed to publish notice in the future. So again, I would recommend if there's a motion. Okay, I'll make the motion. So I make the motion to approve item 7H, setting Park Maintenance District annual assessments, consistent with the staff recommendation, with the exception that paragraph 6 be drafted to be consistent with the other approved resolutions to refer to the past notice of this hearing and the conduct of this hearing today, rather than referring to it in the future tense.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Neese. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion, anybody in opposition, say nay.
Nay.
Voting in opposition, council members Purington and Tidswell. The motion passes 8-2. Item 7I, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution assessing weed abatements as amended to include property A03523 to the amount of $174, property A18004 to the amount of $90.
7I.
Oh, sorry.
This-
Nope, wrong. I move, having conducted...
Nuisance property
Okay.
abatement assessments.
I got the wrong one. Sorry. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve resolution assessing nuisance property abatements as recommended by staff.
Second.
Councilmember Neese. Discussion. I will raise an item of discussion on this item, on this one, and probably Karen or Chris or if whoever from staff feels like commenting. I just point out for council and the public that what we're collecting from each property owner is about $644, $675, and $513. And in the staff report, it gives a long account of the multi-year process of getting them to actually do anything. And so the actual costs or the cost of sending somebody else to maybe do a cleanup, but it includes no compensation for what I imagine are dozens of hours of city attorney time, city code enforcement officers, city administrator time, city council members handling calls from the public or whatever. And I understand the need to not go overboard and trying to recoup our costs, but it's silly if we think that we're actually recouping our actual costs. And I just give staff an opportunity to comment if you disagree or agree, and whether we should be doing something to at least track those additional costs, even if we didn't want to finally assess the homeowners for all of those things. Chris?
Yes, so Wyatt and I had part of this conversation, so please correct anything if I get it wrong. One, but we could use the information potentially to make legislative changes. There is a hard cap, as I understand it, in the municipal court that we can only recoup not more than $9,600, the $9,500. So I don't know if that has been a disincentive to frankly tracking everything. If we hit, I don't know how often we hit that cap. Maybe it says it right in that memo. Pretty rarely we hit that cap. Now, if we have made some decisions of recent to go to district court where that cap doesn't exist, where some of the projects have been exorbitant. But those are general statements. I appreciate the opportunity and frankly would welcome Wyatt's more experience at, just giving feedback as to how have we tracked these, and is this something, as Tina's implementing, kind of how we're handling these now, something we should be tracking more directly.
Wyeth or Tina, do you want to comment on the topic?
Well, my goal is to try to keep costs down, and I respect the fact that we're trying to track man hours for this. These are properties that were abated before or as I was coming on. So as we move forward through our abatement processes, we're actually shortening those times. So those narratives that you read, I'm hoping to shorten the gap of time and man hours that it takes to do those things. And we're going to have a more consistent method of doing that. And I think that will save us man hours and time in that respect. Chris is correct, there is a cap. So we have to be careful when we're doing these abatements to not exceed that. And sometimes when we have to bring in some of the big equipment from Public Works to help us clear a property, that costs money. So I don't want to exceed that cost because then the city basically absorbs that, anything over that $9,500. So we just did an abatement at a property that will probably either hit that mark or slightly exceed it because it was such a terrible property, but it had to be done. And that was a 2-year process.
Oh, okay. Obviously, the cap's not an issue here. We're not even close to 10%. Not even close to 10%. So should we be tracking your time, your officer's time, and attorney time, and any other staff members' time?
To be honest, it would probably take me more time to track the time. It would create more work for me to track the time.
Okay.
That's just my personal
Councilmember
opinion.
Trickey, Councilmember Joy, and Wyeth, you want to comment, and then Councilmember Trickey and Joy.
Well, so I guess a couple things, and just to add to what Tina's saying. I mean, first, these are relative in terms of the actual abatement part of this, and I understand the discussion about the additional work. These are small. When we are and are very careful when you're going to see some abatements that are. I mean, when you start taking structures down, yeah, you're going $9,500 goes very quickly. So we are being careful and moving forward, being really watching that to work with legal to take those to district court so that we don't have that issue and we're able to go above that. The only times where we've actually had success and not been at district court in those situations is when the property owner has signed a voluntary abatement agreement, and then we can then do clean it up and assess them. But in most cases, that doesn't happen. So we're going to have to watch that based on that cap with some of these bigger abatements that are going to happen. We do have a budget, which you approve for us every year for code enforcement. That's an abatement budget. We expect that some of that's going to get spent, and we're not going to recoup everything. We know that on some of the projects, and that's just where things go over. Like Tina's saying, the one we just did is probably going to exceed $9,500. In terms of tracking all those costs of, everyone leading up to this, I mean, that would be, yeah, we have not done that. It could be pretty challenging, but if there was a place that the council and the city, wants to look at in terms of what these are costing, I mean, you could do that in a lot of situations. And yeah, there's a lot of time involved, absolutely. I will echo what Tina said, though, that we are shortening this down now where there's a notice, there's sometimes a second, opportunity and second notice, and then we're moving to court much quicker than we used to. So the anticipation is, 2 years, a year, whatever. We're narrowing that down on a lot of these properties in these situations.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Trickey and Joy and Nice.
This isn't directly related to this year's thing, but was the action that was taken on Miles Avenue last week, I'm just trying to connect dots here, is that something that's going to show up on this list next year?
Eventually, yes.
Okay, thank you.
That was the one that's probably going to reach or maybe exceed that 9,500, but I'm trying to stretch those dollars because the more abatements we can do, the cleaner our city gets.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. This isn't a question, just a comment, but I just hope that, we start getting a reputation. When code enforcement shows up, people are like, ooh, maybe I should watch what I'm doing. I'm thinking of one of these properties up here where the owner knew that he wasn't allowed to do something and he did it anyway, and then called me back and said, look how much money I put into this, and now it's all going to be taken down, and that's a 2-year process. So maybe someday or other, property owners are going to realize, hey, if you put $3,000 into something you're not supposed to do, and you knew you weren't supposed to do it, hey, tough. And that might actually get the word out, because people do talk to each other and they do notice when the city shows up and takes something down. Maybe eventually we'll get that feeling out there like, yeah, they're serious about not having things that aren't supposed to be there put there. Thank you.
And to your point, I think we are starting to actually already see that.
Great, thank you, Councilor Denise. Come back, Councilor Trickey.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for bringing this up, because actually I noticed that one of the items, we had two police officers sitting there watching people work instead of being out on the street patrolling. And so I think it's really important that we do log every man hour we can for this. And if we're not doing it now and we're approaching 9,500 on some of these, then we're way over 9,500 on probably a project like that. So I think it's very, very important that we actually come up with the actual cost of what it is costing and recoup the property owners. So there are some teeth as far as what's going on. So I know it takes some time, and maybe we need some different type of software to help with that. But I think that's something that I would like to see, Chris, if that's, make sure that we're actually charging what it is costing the city to do these abatements. So thank you.
Councilor Trickey.
And since we're going to talk about that, I would just say you don't have to do all of the costs or anything like that. I would say just ballpark estimates so we have an idea of what's going on there. What I forgot to say, though, on Miles Avenue one was I really wanted to thank you. I mean, obviously, you are getting the system streamlined, because this was an issue that came up to my attention early in the summer, and you resolved it by the first week in September. So I know that the residents in the neighborhood are extremely happy, and thank you for not taking 3 years.
Oh, you're welcome. That one we had to do in 2 phases, so we're still not done, but it does look a lot cleaner. And to your point, the officers that we utilize for our abatements when we require a standby because we think it could be a violent situation, we don't remove them from a beat. Those are officers that I ask for in advance, and they're either the parks officer or one of the downtown, or not downtown, but one of the CPC officers. So we don't pull from the street.
Okay, thank you. Anything further before we proceed to a vote? Councilor Pritchett?
Well, I just want to commend Tina for what a good job you've been doing. You haven't been on, 6 months yet? And I think you haven't been on as code enforcement director
9
for
months.
6 months. 9 months, okay. And I just think you're doing an awesome job. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. On the question of logging hours, I certainly am sympathetic. We don't want to 95% of these things get taken care of, and there's no reason to start the clock and go to all of that. But I would encourage staff to think about it, whether there's a trigger point, a second notice, or something like that, where it's clear there's a problem. And at that relatively small number of situations, at that point, start tracking time in some way, because I think that'd be useful information for us. So anyway, we'll proceed to a vote. So the item is 7I. Councilmembers Joy, second by Councilmember Neese, made the motion for approval consistent with the staff recommendation. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Brings us to item 7J, which is our final item. I will also make this motion because of the previous issue. So item 7J, dealing with weed abatements, having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution assessing weed abatements as recommended by staff, with the exception that staff be directed to modify in the resolution paragraph 4 dealing with the notice of hearing to make it read in the past tense, consistent with the other approved recommendations, or the other approved resolutions. Second by Councilmember Gulick. You beat him to,
However, I need to amend it to what, I recommend we amend it to Andy's thing. We're going to, actually, I'll let Councilwoman Joy, because she did it last time and she knows exactly what to say.
Okay.
Thank you. Parcels A03523 and A18004 reduced to $174.90 respectively.
I still second.
And the total amount of weed assessments to $8,360.25.
And only 41 properties.
And only 41 properties.
Thank you for those things, and I would consider that a friendly amendment, a consent to the amendment. And Councilmember Gulick, are you okay with treating that? So that'd be incorporated as part of the motion. Discussion. Any discussion? Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. My thought is, what happens if you weren't here tonight? We would have passed this the way it was. Who should have been monitoring this to make sure that all of these were the same? Should that have been?
You read them.
The world would not have ended. I think people call them extremely minor tweaks, but I agree that somebody should be catching those.
I'll make it, Mayor, if you don't mind, make a note that there is a spot for legal review, and none of these were reviewed by our legal department. So it's possible that if they would have reviewed it, they may have caught that. Since
you're right, there's a line that says no on that. So, Chris, I guess does beg the question. I know we're trying to save time for our legal department. Should all of these things be going through legal?
So no, we do not want everything going through legal, but we certainly, it's an error that we do try to catch, because the person who submits them first is supposed to make sure it's right, and then our clerk's office, and we do review on Tuesdays of each week, but it's not acceptable to have them go through. I just wouldn't say legal is where we want every document on the packet to be the quality control measure.
Okay, we'll try to be more careful. Councilmember Joy?
And we've got 22 eyes. 11 people with 2 sets of eyes. I really do think that there's a lot of, we're very good at reading. We do catch things. Things have been caught over a period of time. And I think it's really actually showing the public that we do read our packets when we find them. So I'm not saying that's a good thing to do. I'm not saying we should try to make mistakes to see if council can catch it. But if council is catching it, we're reading our packets. So we're showing the public we're doing our due diligence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concluded then item 7J, weed abatements. Did we vote? No, we haven't voted on this yet. Okay. Getting ahead of myself. Just wanted to. Okay, so any other discussion on item 7J, weed abatements? Now we'll proceed to a vote. If in favor of approval, that now modified motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Brings us to public comment on non-agenda items. Anything not on our agenda tonight that anybody would like to comment on? Seeing none, we'll close that. Council initiatives. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I just have an update for everyone on the council subcommittee initiative, especially since it came up earlier, to say that Jennifer and I got a draft to Gina last week of the initial resolution kind of idea. She's on vacation, so I had a conversation with Chris. They are going to review it and get it back to us in the next couple of weeks, so that should be coming very soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for working on that. Thank you for the update. Anything else? If not, we are adjourned.